By the time the Rolling Stones began calling themselves the world's greatest rock and roll band in the late 60s, they had already staked out an impressive claim on the title. As the self-consciously dangerous alternative to the bouncy Merseybeat of the Beatles in the British Invasion, the Stones had pioneered the gritty, hard-driving blues-based rock and roll that came to define hard rock. With his preening machismo and latent maliciousness, Mick Jagger became the prototypical rock frontman, tempering his macho showmanship with a detached, campy irony, while Keith Richards and Brian Jones wrote the blueprint for sinewy, interlocking rhythm guitars. Backed by the strong yet subtly swinging rhythm section of bassist Bill Wyman and drummer Charlie Watts, the Stones became the breakout band of the British blues scene, eclipsing such contemporaries as the Animals and Them. Over the course of their career, the Stones never really abandoned blues, but as soon as they gained popularity in the UK, they began experimenting musically, incorporating the British pop of contemporaries like the Beatles, the Kinks, and the Who into their sound. After a brief dalliance with psychedelia, the Stones re-emerged in the late 60s as a jaded, blues-soaked hard rock quintet. They had always flirted with the seedy side of rock and roll, but as the hippie dream began to break apart, they exposed and reveled in the new rock culture. It wasn't without difficulty. Shortly after he was fired from the group, Jones was found dead in a swimming pool, while at a 1969 free concert at Altamont, a concertgoer was brutally killed during a Stones show. But the Stones never stopped going. For the next 50-plus years, they continued to record and perform, and while their records weren't always blockbusters, they were never less than the most visible band of their era. Certainly, none of their British peers continued to be as popular or productive as the Stones. No band since has proven to have such a broad fan base or such far-reaching popularity, and it is impossible to hear any of the groups that followed them without detecting some sort of influence, whether it was musical or aesthetic. Here are facts about Rolling Stones. Rolling Stones and the Altamont free concert tragedy. According to The Telegraph, the Rolling Stones' disastrous free concert at Altamont on December 6, 1969, was the day the music died. The event was meant to be a happy, hippie, Woodstock-type thing, but as Rolling Stone notes, the location was changed a mere 20 hours before the concert to Altamont Speedway, which was dreary, gray, treeless, and pretty much the opposite of the intended effect, especially as the sound system was laughably underpowered. As a result, some of the audience members grew angry, and the Hells Angels taking care of the security were all too happy to return the hostility. It didn't help that the promoters had neglected to inform the surrounding landowners about the event, and they were quite hostile when they discovered a horde of hippies and musicians hanging about and using their fields as toilets. The result was an unmitigated disaster. As soon as the Stones' helicopters touched the ground, Mick Jagger was welcomed with a sucker punch. The crowd grew worse and worse by the performer, and by the time the Rolling Stones hit the stage, it was a bloodbath that finally escalated to a point where an 18-year-old audience member called Meredith Hunter was stabbed to death by the bikers during the Stones concert. The incident thoroughly shocked the band, and a total of 4 people died at Altamont. The downfall of Brian Jones. Perhaps the biggest Rolling Stones tragedy involving a band member was the downfall of Brian Jones. As Ultimate Classic Rock tells us, Jones got fired from the band on June 8, 1969, though the other Stones apparently allowed him to announce his own departure as he saw fit. "I no longer see eye to eye with the others over the discs we are cutting," his statement started, before going on to lay blame to his former bandmates Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. "I want to play my kind of music, which is no longer the Stones' music. The music Mick and Keith have been writing has progressed at a tangent, as far as my own taste is concerned." In a way, he had a point, as bassist Bill Wyman would later note. Jones had been the de facto leader of the Stones at the early stages of their career before the sheer personality and songwriting talent of Jagger and Richards bowled him over. Unfortunately, the world never got to see what Jones had on offer. He was already riding a downward spiral, and UCR writes that within 3 weeks after his departure, the lifeless Jones was found floating face down in his swimming pool, another member of the infamous 27 Club. Why this happened is anyone's guess. Though the coroner ruled death by misadventure, many have suspected over the years that someone else was involved in his death, maybe to the point of murdering him. The Rolling Stones lost their best musician early on. It's not unfair to say the Rolling Stones are pretty decent musicians. Few people with zero talent can excel for so long and still sell out stadiums well into the 6th decade of their career. However, there's no telling how good they might have been had they not lost their best musician early on. As Lauder tells us, guitarist Mick Taylor was the Rolling Stones' secret weapon during the golden early 1970s years in their career, until he unexpectedly walked out in December 1974. The fluent melodic player is still considered as something of the one that got away by many fans, and even the band itself, albeit sometimes begrudgingly. Drummer Charlie Watts has called the Taylor period the band's creative peak. In the 1990s, Mick Jagger came very close to publicly admitting that the Exile on Main Street-era Stones is the best version that ever existed. Even the grumpy guitar maestro Keith Richards has stated that Taylor's departure left the band in a lurch. The precise reason for Taylor's departure has always been somewhat shrouded in mystery, largely thanks to the subtly contradicting versions told by Taylor himself. Some say it was about songwriting credits, interpersonal tensions, marriage and/or drug problems, or even simple boredom. It could also be that Taylor simply found the rock star life too much, as he was more of a shy, withdrawn character, which probably didn't mesh too well with the outrageous Glimmer Twins. The Great Rolling Stones Drug Bust of 1967. The Rolling Stones have been known to be quite fond of certain illegal substances, and as NME reports, the Great Drug Bust of 1967 made it clear to the unwashed masses. This massive police raid at Keith Richards' West Sussex mansion saw both Richards and Mick Jagger get arrested, and the ensuing high-profile trial eventually landed the initially nonchalant Glimmer Twins in serious hot water. As the BBC tells us, Jagger ultimately received a 3-month sentence for amphetamine possession, and Richards was sentenced to an entire year in prison for allowing cannabis to be smoked in his home. Fortunately for them, both sentences were ultimately overturned. Incidentally, it must be noted that the incident was not quite as gruesome as legend would have you believe. As Ultimate Classic Rock notes, there's a persistent legend that the cops bust in just as Jagger was enjoying a Mars bar from girlfriend Marianne Faithfull's private regions. This, according to Faithfull, is nothing but an urban legend told by thirsty rock historians. Actually, when the law arrived, she had just bathed and the police found her wrapped in a towel. The feuding Glimmer Twins. A successful songwriting partnership is one way to describe the long and rocky relationship between Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. According to the Irish Independent, another possibly more accurate way is to call them a civil war between two massive egomaniacs. According to Ultimate Classic Rock, the Glimmer Twins' volatile chemistry has been close to breaking up the Rolling Stones several times over their long and storied career. Richards feels that this is largely because while the two stars know each other extremely well, they're also generally a little unsure about each other. Richards pins a large part of the pair's issues to Jagger's control-freak nature and Richards' own tendency to challenge the singer to the point that he occasionally even wakes up to make notes when he dreams up a particularly good line he can save for later use against Jagger. Sometimes, the animosity between Jagger and Richards has been more than just professional and creative disagreements. According to The Guardian, one such case came in the 1960s, when Richards became convinced that his girlfriend Anita Pallenberg was having an affair with Jagger during a movie shoot. At the time, the bitterness drove the guitarist to write the Rolling Stones' classic Gimme Shelter, and the hurt from that time is still plainly visible in the pages of Richards' 2010 autobiography Life. The Rolling Stones meet the law. The Rolling Stones have had their brushes with the law, according to Ultimate Classic Rock. Their troubles started with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards' infamous drug bust in 1967, and continued mere months later when Brian Jones was arrested for marijuana possession and allowing folks to smoke in his home. All three got away with a warning, though Jones repeated his error in 1968. This time, he was facing prison, but his lawyers were able to plead mental health issues and get Jones away with another warning. However, the situation made it difficult for him to obtain a U.S. visa. 1968 went on to involve yet another marijuana charge, and the 1970s brought even more trouble. In 1972, drummer Charlie Watts' wife Shirley was arrested for causing a scene at an airport. Later that year, Jagger and Richards were yet again arrested, this time for fighting with a photographer. In 1973, it was Richards and drugs again. In 1975, Richards and Ronnie Wood for reckless driving while smelling of pot and carrying a hunting knife. 1977 saw yet another drug arrest for Richards. After this, the band has apparently cleaned up their act somewhat, though in 1990, Wood was cautioned for common assault against his girlfriend. It appears the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. In 2011, Richard's daughter Theodora got busted for graffiti and pills.